talk running backs. Let's talk running backs in college football in Texas. We are kind of looking across the rosters, and we're seeing who has the strength at which positions across the state. Earlier this week, we talked about quarterbacks. Let's talk about running backs. Running backs are a little bit harder to determine simply because
the game's changed, right?
We are now in the age where the bell cow running back is really losing its footing. That almost every team has some sort of running back by committee.
Yeah. Really, we're talking about, if we're being honest here and we're looking at the situations of each team, it's who's got the best two running backs.
Yeah,
right?
That's really the thing to go with, right? It'd be like, who has the best running game?
And if it is that argument, I know we're going to talk about it some more, but I don't think it's close.
Right. I think
I think we're probably on the same page here.
I think you're right as well. But, for example, as far as in the state of Texas, the guy who led the state in rushing attempts, boy howdy. It was Jeffrey Wilson in North Texas, 188 carries. That's the most. Okay,
he was huge for North Texas. I mean, if you weren't paying attention to North Texas the last few years, we were, but he was such a huge part of their success.
I mean, there were only, think about this, in the nation.
Yeah,
there were only 17 running backs who averaged 20 attempts a game.
Game's changed.
The game has changed.
Yeah.
That's just the way that it is. It's such a physical game now that you can't subject these guys to 20 carries a game.
Yeah.
So, in order to take a look at the returning running backs in college football, I had to kind of move the bar. But you also don't want to get into the situation where you're talking about guys who had 7 carries.
Right.
So I set the bar, kind of looking at everybody, I set the bar at 74 carries.
Right.
74 carries is where you can qualify, okay? And I looked at, again, rate stats, particularly yards per carry, and then touchdowns, right? So, to me, there are 18 running backs who had at least 74 carries coming back from last year. The one who had the lowest yards per carry, Kyle Porter, the running back of Texas. And actually, Texas does not fare particularly well in this. They've got two, but their leading rusher last year was, do you know this?
I'm going to say Ellinger.
It was Ellinger.
Yeah.
Sam Ellinger, their quarterback. Yeah. So, their running game was pretty much non-existent last year. They do bring back Daniel Young and Kyle Porter, but, I mean, what does that even mean, right? We'll find out. A lot of that has to do with what their offensive line looks like.
Right. I don't necessarily think that's an indictment of the guys themselves. I think they have issues on the line.
Right. If you are interested, if what you want to judge this by is who has a nose for the end zone, then I think you got to go with SMU.
Yeah.
Kamon Freeman is the top returning rushing touchdown leader. He had 11 touchdowns. Xavier Jones is right behind him with 9.
Yeah.
Now, they were also a team that scored a lot. If you want to go with that, I think that's the way you go. If you all go with yards per carry, the returning leader in yards per carry in the state, do you have a guess?
Alona Lua.
He actually did not qualify.
Oh, okay. So
but right team.
Anderson.
Darius Anderson.
Yeah.
Running back for TCU, averaged 6 yards a carry. Right behind him was Xavier Jones at SMU.
Right.
Followed by Nick Smith at North Texas, who was Jeffrey Wilson's backup. Yep. Followed by Jalen Rhodes at UTSA, and then Mulba Carr at Houston. So, taking all of this into account, and just kind of looking at all the numbers, I think there are 3 guys, maybe 4, that you can make an argument as being the top returning running back in the state in college football in 2018. 4th place for me would be Nick Smith at North Texas.
Yeah.
Part of that is that this is a projection pick. He showed well in spelling.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Wilson, who had such a great year last year. We presume that the offense is going to stay a lot of the same, and as a result, he will get those carries that Jeffrey Wilson got and should do well. Right. I think that, when you look at his numbers, what he had spelling Jeffrey Wilson, it's encouraging.
Yeah, very underrated DFW running back coming out of Arlington Martin as well.
Absolutely, and that's the North Texas games, underrated running backs. Remember, Jeffrey Wilson was super prolific at Elkhart before he went to North Texas. Yeah. Now he's going to the combine.
Yeah.
Be fun. 3rd place for me is Travion Williams at Texas A&M. Okay, this guy, I know that A&M's offense really sputtered depending on who the quarterback was.
Right.
But Travion Williams was probably their most consistent threat.
Mm-hmm.
More than 4.5 yards a carry, found the end zone 8 times. I think if I'm Jimbo Fisher, I look at him as a legit asset. That, like, you may not know who your quarterback is. You may be kind of thinking things. But I say, Travion Williams, you're my guy at the running back spot. I think he's the guy that A&M should really start thinking about hanging their hat on. Second place for me is Xavier Jones, okay, at SMU. He was fantastic last year. I think a lot of people necessarily didn't pay attention to him because he's a running back at an air raid team.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like when you're Trey King. Right. Trey King was the backup running back for Texas Tech, and he had a pretty good year.
Right.
But nobody really knows about him because he's a running back at Texas Tech. I think it's the same way with Xavier Jones at SMU. He was really, really solid, and whereas he's kind of the lightning to Kamon Freeman's thunder, I think that he could be in for a very big year in 2018 for SMU. That's a guy that I think would put second. But number one for me is Darius Anderson.
Yeah.
I think Darius Anderson has to be considered the best running back in the state coming back right now, just because of the numbers he put up, what he looked like. And beyond that, they have done a really good job of managing everyone's carries.
Mm-hmm.
They, when you look at, if you're taking a holistic view at the running game, I don't think, I presume this is who you were talking about. I don't think there's any question that TCU's got the strongest running game coming back. Yeah. Yes, they lose Kyle Hicks, okay? But they got Darius Anderson back. They got Shewa Lonalua back. They've got Kennedy Snell, who got 25 carries last year. I mean, they have got a great running game coming back.
Yeah.
And if you add in, if you're going to get a dynamic running threat in Sean Robinson as well, then all of a sudden the running game for TCU looks really, really
It's really interesting. Yeah.
And to me, Darius Anderson is going to be the guy. If you look at this, they had 3 guys who had 100 carries. Okay, one of them was Kenny Hill, but then they had Kyle Hicks and Darius Anderson, who each had more than 100. They had at least 128 carries apiece. That's the way that Gary Patterson wants to do. He wants to spread it out. But if you're looking for a bell cow, I think you could do a lot worse than Darius Anderson. I'm very interested to see what they do with Shewa Lonalua this year. He's a guy that we saw being a very versatile goal line back. He had 7 touchdowns on just 64 carries. I mean, this was a guy who, when they got down first and goal at the 5, they were going to him and bringing him in kind of the wildcat situation. So, very interested to see what they do with Shewa Lonalua. See if they can get the ball to Kennedy Snell a little bit more. But in any case, for me right now, I think that you have to consider Darius Anderson the top returning running back in the state. It's close. There's a few different guys, I think, in the mix. But for me, I think it's got to start. The conversation starts with Darius Anderson.
There are also a lot of changes around the state that'll make this interesting. We can't predict who's going to emerge, but you've got a new offensive situation at Rice. You've got a new offensive situation at Houston. People forget that. Maybe Mulbacar ends up being even more of a threat than he was last year. I mean, he's still pretty young. We don't know how UTSA is going to change now. They've changed things up.
And they have Jalen Rhodes, who was excellent.
Jalen Rhodes was good. Do they add something to that backfield there? We don't know what's going to happen at UTEP. And there's a lot of pressure at all these other places, A&M, Texas, Baylor, to really emerge and do something next level with the offenses. So I'm kind of excited to see what the running games do.
I mean, if you look at Baylor, they're bringing back JaMychal Hasty and they're bringing back John Lovett, who had good years for a bad team.
Right.
Same thing with UTEP. UTEP's bringing back Joshua Fields. They've got Q Wadley, if he's healthy. I mean, there's a lot of different moving parts here that right now, to me, the most sure thing would be Darius Anderson.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think there's any question, but I think that maybe more so than quarterbacks, because it's a little bit trickier to see who's going to take a leap. It's more fun with the running backs because I think there's a lot of unknowns here that could turn into a lot of fun.
I think you're right.